Okay, so this little tutorial here is going to show you how to get Unity up and going, some basics about it. This is primarily for doing work with 2D games. So I'm going to walk you through the beginning all the way through, starting it up for the first time, and downloading some asset packs and that sort of stuff. And this is all going to be for the Unity 5 series. There's other videos on my YouTube channel that deal with Unity 4.3 and 4.6, but this one will be for the Unity 5. Things changed a little bit, and so I just want to make sure everything's kept up to date, and I'll go ahead and go re-record some of these videos. So if you already saw the other videos and you're comfortable with how they work and you can use them in the new version of Unity, then you're good to go. You probably won't learn anything new on this one. But for those of you who are just starting out with Unity 5, this will be a good place to go. So I'll just get right into it, and we'll start with our Unity here. So here's the new GUI that we've got, and we'll start a new project, and I am just going to call this test 2D1. How's that sound? And we will start with a 2D um, uh, defaults. So we'll have 2D selected, and we'll hit create project. And hopefully something will show up here pretty soon. It did. And so if you're following along, hopefully you have something that looks a lot like this, which is just a blank screen. So I'll go through some of the buttons that are available on this sort of thing, and then we'll download a 2D starter pack, and we'll go from there, show you, how it all works. But mainly we've got two tabs here at the top. We've got scene and game. Game is going to be what you see when you actually run the game. And then scene is sort of where you can build your game and put all your pieces in here and things like that. Over here on the left, we've got our hierarchy of objects that are in our scene. And right now we've got one, which is a camera. And it has a blue background, and that is why our camera preview is just blue. We don't have any objects in our scene. We don't have any characters or levels or any of that sort of stuff. We have nothing. All we have is a camera, and so the scene here is just plain blue. Over on the right, you will see properties of any of the objects you have selected on the left. So right now, if I have nothing selected on the left, we have no properties. As soon as I click on the main camera, we've got all sorts of properties that deal with the main camera. And as far as clipping planes, I mean, you could read through all this sort of stuff. Positioning, all that sort of stuff, that's all over here. And this will be the same for basically any object we put in our scene. Even if it's an empty object that we create and start adding stuff to it, over on the right is always going to be the details on it in the inspector. Now, and I said over on the right, you can customize the interface however you want to. If you want to drag the inspector over to this side, you can do it so it's a separate tab, or you can move it down here or wherever you want to go. I'm just going to leave it over on the right because that's where I like it. I like this default section of Windows, but you can customize this however you want. Just grab the tab, drag it, and wherever you want to put it, and you'll be good to go. Down here on the bottom, I haven't talked about that yet. This is all the areas for your project in this project tab. We've got an assets folder. Right now it's empty because our game currently has no assets. But if we had pictures and animations and sounds and all that sort of stuff, we would dump it down here. Scripts, that sort of stuff will all go down here in our project tab in the assets folder, and that will be what we use to create our games with. There's a console tab. Right now it's empty, but we'll see some debug messages, maybe some error messages here when we try to build our game. A couple things. Clear on play means every time we run, it's going to clear it out. Clear is just going to clear it out, whatever happens to be there. We've got animation, animator. We'll get to those things a little bit later. But for now, that's sort of the walkthrough here. We've got our controls up at the top, play and pause. And if you play, you'll actually see your game. This is what our game looks like. And then if we unplay, we'll go back to being able to edit our game. Over here, we have these options that help us control how we interact with our scene builder. And these different options here make different things happen. And we'll get into those as we start building stuff, the differences between using all these different things. But one thing to remember is always just click on them, try them out, see what they do. Right now it's not really going to do a whole lot because we don't have anything in our scene. So we'll get into the details of how to use these things as we start putting stuff into our scene. Let's see. So in order to start building stuff, one thing that's pretty cool about Unity is that they've got a really neat thing called the Asset Store. So if you go to Window, go to Asset Store, it'll pop up this thing here. And you may have to create an account or log in, that sort of stuff, if it doesn't have your stuff cached. I'm not sure. But what I want to do in here, there's a 2D default platformer pack that we can download and install. We've got all these categories over here. I'm just going to go to Complete Projects, and I'm hoping it shows up because I can't remember the specific name to search for. It's by Unity Technologies, and here we go. Why is this? So this is the thing I'm looking for. I want one by Unity Technologies, not by that place. So do we have anything by Unity? What Unity Tech Demos? No. Let's see. How about if I just search for 2D platformer? 2D. Let's see what shows up here. Here we go. So now we show up with this thing right here, 2D platformer by Unity Technologies. So make sure you get the one by Unity Technologies. There was that other one I was looking at. I don't know where it went, but this thing, this Key Corporation, I have no idea what it is. So Unity allows you to download all these assets. Let's just go ahead and let's click on this one. And we can download it here. Oops, wants me to log in. So I'll download it. And as it's going, yes, this is a pretty quick one. But Unity allows you to use these assets in any game that you want. You can sell it and all that sort of stuff. And so it was a little confusing in the asset store because it had, there's that other Key company had used the assets to make one that looked the same. But anyways, we'll use the one from Unity. When we're done downloading, it's going to ask us to import it. And these are all the pieces that make up this particular game. And we can just say, we're just going to keep all of them checked. That's how the default is, and we'll just say import. And it should bring it into our little game here. And then we got some screenshots, and depending on who has stuff, we'll get more in the asset store later, but sometimes there's videos and things like that, so you know exactly what you're getting. Okay, so API update required. Apparently this platformer that Unity provides was only built for Unity 4.3. They did not release a new one for 5.1. So it's asking us here, do we want to go ahead and update this? Let's just say, we did it. We made an update. And looks like everything finished. So I'm going to close this tab. We could take this asset store tab and put it in with the rest of our stuff. If we wanted to, you can just drag it up and give it a new tab up here. So you're seeing your game and your asset store always visible. That's just one of the ways you can customize your display here. I'm going to drag this thing out and just close it. Not leave it open all the time. And what happened here? All right, so now that we imported our 2D platformer, we've got all these folders. Now we've got stuff inside of our assets. We've got animations of these different things, and we will play with these a little bit later. We've got audio, these different WAV files or MP3s. I don't know what they are, but they're there. They play different sounds. Let's see, do we have... yeah, so we've got some sound here. We can hit the play button to listen to them. We've got our background music. We can preview it over here on the side. Bunch of other things in here. One of the important thing, though, that I want to bring up right now is down here under Scenes. If we go to Assets, we can also find it, Scenes. Levels in Unity are called scenes. And we're going to just open up, we've already created our first scene here when we did a new project, but we didn't do anything to it because all we had was a main camera. So I'm going to open up this level scene, and this becomes our main scene. And now it's pretty cool because look at all the stuff we've got over here on the left. These are all our different objects that are in this scene. But what I'm going to do, just because it's fun, I'm just going to hit the play button and see what this thing does. So if I hit play, there we go. And using the arrow keys, I'm doing stuff. Spacebar is jumping. Somehow you can shoot. I can't remember. There we go. Control is shooting. And so I am shooting stuff. We've got scores that are working. And this is pretty neat. And so now we've got this thing that does a lot of stuff that we want it to do. And we can start using this as sort of a template to learn how to do games in Unity. We've got sounds that play when we, background music. We've got sounds that play when I click the button, the shooting sound. We have animations that are playing, like this explosion animation. It's playing when it needs to. We've got animations in the background, like this little duck goose thing here flying. We've got a score that's being kept track of. We've even got a health bar on our guy here. We've got platforms to stand on. Something is controlling these enemies and telling them where to turn and how to go, and more stuff in the background here with this car. And let's see. So we've got a lot of stuff that's happening. We've got all the source code provided to be able to figure out how all this happens, and that's cool. It's really worthwhile going through this sort of stuff, especially if it's your first time in game dev. This gives you a really, really good place to start. So to stop playing this game, I'm going to go up to this play button here that we hit, and I'm going to unplay it, and that'll bring us back here to where we started from. And from here, we can start poking around and looking at some of the things that are in this scene. And again, we're on the Scene tab. If we go to the Game tab, it's going to look kind of similar, but the Game tab is what the actual game camera is going to show when you run it. The Scene tab is going to show what you're looking at when you're working on it. So notice I've got the hand selected over here in the upper left, and that'll allow me to move my scene around like this. So if I want to pan to different sections of my scene to work on it, I can just click and drag and move it around. Same thing, the scroll wheel, I can zoom in, or zoom out, sorry, all the way out. I can zoom all the way in and go really far in, and be able to work on different areas. So if I wanted to, zoom in on this side, I can move it around and look real closely at this certain area. Or if I had a really gigantic map, I could move around and zoom in on this side, sort of stuff. So anyways, that's some of the controls for looking around. We can do other things like move our objects. Like right now we have backgrounds. What is backgrounds? Backgrounds, with this move button selected, we can come over here and we can change our X and Y location of our backgrounds. So you can just click on this arrow here and move it up, and it's going to drag the backgrounds up. And notice while I'm doing this, over on the right, over here, is the Y value. And so as I'm dragging this thing up and down, the Y value is changing over there. And you can change that value by doing this. You can come in and just type in a number, say 0. Or if you hover your mouse over the actual letter Y and click, you can drag left and right, and that'll move your values up and down. And so, these are the 3 different ways you can do things. I'm just going to set it back to 0, which is where we started. But anyways, yeah, so you can manipulate these data values in a whole bunch of different methods. Notice over here where backgrounds is, it's got this little triangle to the left of it. That means there's more stuff underneath it. And so I expand it, and now we've got a lot of things here. We've got clouds, more background stuff. So this is like a big group, and this backgrounds is the parent object. So as I was moving backgrounds around, all of the stuff below it was moving with it. But we can move just one thing around, like, I don't know what this thing is. Let's see. There we go. So I can move this. Notice how everything else is staying still because I'm moving just this one thing. So I don't know where that was before. So you can just move individual things around, or you can move groups around. And that's really useful to be able to have all those different types of options. Let's see, clouds. Got a whole bunch of clouds. One. So here's this thing, these clouds. And then we have another set of clouds somewhere else. Where are they at? They're over here, off screen. And so what's happening with these clouds, when we run the game, let's see what happens. Nothing. Typically what will happen with the clouds, maybe they're moving really slow. I can't tell, are they even moving at all? No. Sometimes what you might want to do with clouds is, and maybe it's just not set up that way, is you want them to scroll across, and so you'll have two copies. Anything you want to have scrolling, you'll generally have two copies of it. One over here that'll scroll off, so as those clouds move this way, and then once they get so far, you will move them all the way back this way, and then start sliding them back across the screen again like this. So maybe that's not exactly how they're programmed to be working in this one, but it's a pretty good use of having two of the same sprite that just sort of rotate and wrap around. Let's see. This button here is going to give you the bounds of your sprite. So this is, the whole bounds of our cloud. And with that, you can scale it just by dragging on the corner and position it a little bit differently. And that makes it pretty easy to do. And notice also over here on the right, I'll undo this. We've got these scale factors here, X, Y, and Z. For the 2D stuff, we're primarily just going to be only using X and Y coordinates. But you can scale this thing in the X direction. See how it's scaling in the X direction? And you can scale it the same way in the Y direction. Like this. That goes for any sprite. Let's undo that. And notice if you want to flip things, you can say I want to scale it, -1. Now they're upside down. And again, we're looking at the clouds that are over here. So that's a quick way. When we get into working with platformers and stuff like that, usually you'll have your character drawn so he's always facing like to the right. And then when you want him to face to the left, you just change the scale on the X scale to like a -1 or whatever, -1 times whatever you started at. And that'll get them facing the other direction. So it's a real cheap way to use one graphic and have it look fairly intelligent. But we'll get there in a couple weeks about how to do that. So let's see, what else do we have? Let's zoom in on this thing. We have, this is something called foregrounds. I clicked on it and we got this thing called foregrounds. What I really want to do though is I want to break this down a little bit more. What is this? Platform, bridge. Here we go. Platform, top. So as I'm clicking on these different things, eventually we're going to see that there is a green box or a series of green boxes around this thing. And so I'm looking to find the one, even though they may be called the same thing, trying to find the one that I'm zoomed in and looking at. And so right here, this thing has a green box going around it, and it has a box collider. So this green box, and we look over here in the properties on the side, it's called a box collider. And that is going to tell us where our guy is going to fall and rest on when we play the game. So having a box collider allows us to let the underlying physics engine handle where these characters fall and make contact with this bridge. So if I hit play, he's going to sit on it. And then if I unplay, I'm going to uncheck this box over here where it says box collider. Uncheck it, which is essentially going to disable this box collider on this little area. And then if I run, he falls right through. And that's because this box collider is in charge of deciding where this thing is going to fall to rest. So It's not intelligent like, oh, I see that there's a bridge here and I understand where he's supposed to rest on. You actually define the outline of where you want to go, and so you can do different things like, here's the size of this box collider. I can make the Y a little bit bigger, like this maybe. And now when we run, he'll be floating a little bit. See, he doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. Or I could do something like, well, we can make it a little bit skinnier like this. And now he's kind of resting behind it. So it gives you maybe a little bit of feel that there's some sort of depth over there. And then kind of a ramp. And the reason there's a little ramp, look, there's another box collider here, which is, down here. And so that first box collider is this big one, and then it has a child that is this box collider here, and so that's how we give ourselves a little jump at the end. But you can go around and create box colliders wherever you want. There's different types of colliders, like this little spaceship guy here. He's got a polygon collider, see over here on the right, and that is, we can make all these different kinds of shapes to make it accurate. So not everything has to be just a big rectangle. We can sort of trace around our objects in our scene and make it as accurate as we want to. But there's all kinds of colliders. There's we can do like circle colliders. Let's see, Unity2D. Yeah, circle collider, box collider, edge collider, polygon. So there's all these different things that we can do with physics, and we'll get into those a little bit later. But I wanted to show you initially how all these sort of things work. Let's see, here's our hero, and what does he have? All these different components. Let's see, assets, sprites. Here's character. Yeah, so here's our hero. We can see that his sprite here is made up of all of these different components, right? He's got this little peanut shape. We've got this little gun, a mustache, some feet, stuff like that. So here's how it looks in this what we call a sprite sheet, and then when it's all assembled, it's going to look like this. So there's different ways to bring in art. You can do it as one big object, one big PNG, or you can have a large PNG that has all the different components in it, and then define what all those components are and assemble it in the game. And that allows us to do things like nice little animations, like when he shoots or jumps, we can move the pieces around. When he shoots, there's like a little bit of a recoil on the cannon here, and we're able to do that fairly easily because the sprites came in all in pieces, and we assemble them inside of here. So for example, like this guy, it's going to be hard to make him do anything because everything's all embedded. Like if you wanted to make him blink or something like that, it'd be kind of hard because everything's all stuck in this one picture. Whereas when we build this Mr. Peanut guy on a fly, we've got all these components and we can assemble them however we want to. I just clicked on Sprite Editor, and if you click on Sprite Editor, you can see that there are all these different components to that sprite, and this is where we would define that inside of Unity. We would open up that Sprite Editor, and we can give each little individual piece of this some sort of name. We can draw rectangles around it to give the XY location, stuff like that. Give it a pivot. So if you want to do some rotating, it would rotate around this point. Or if you wanted to rotate around any other point, you just change your pivot location. So that's the Sprite Editor. And like I said, we're going to get into all of this stuff throughout the rest of the semester. But for now, at the beginning, it's important to just sort of play around with this stuff and see what you can do with it. Let's see. I think there is only one more thing maybe that I wanted to show. Music. Here's how we have sounds. We've got this music object, and we have an audio source associated with it. This thing here, these two checkboxes are kind of important. Play on wake means as soon as we start, it's going to start playing, and then loop means once it finishes to go back and start over again. So we can mess with these things if we don't want to start it until later or until somebody presses a key. We can leave it like this. If we want to play once and stop, then we can do that. One more thing on audio. Let's go to music. So here we have this thing here, and is well, this must have changed. Let's see, music, 3D settings. Well, anyways, that must have changed between Unity 4 and Unity 5. Used to be when you imported a sound, it would have something over here on the right that says something about this is a 2D sound. And I don't see that in here anymore. Well, anyways, if you're having problems hearing sounds, somewhere it might be set to being a 3D sound, which means you have to get close to it to hear it. But I don't. For some reason, that option isn't here anymore. So we just won't worry about that. But anyways, back to the UI. Let's see, what do we have? We have our score, and we have components with our score. Let's run it again and see what we got. So here's our score, but we also have some scripts associated with it. And we have our score selected over here on the left, and then over here on the right we can see the properties of it. And here is a score variable associated with a score script that's attached to our score object, and we can just change these variables like this and see what will happen. And so it's kind of a quick way to go in and do some debugging, like, oh, we want to know what happens when we get to 1,000. Does it actually work? You can come in here, and then if you want to, you can just set this to like 10,000 to see if it's got enough space, or 100,000. Oh, then you can figure out when things stop to work. So here we got magic 2.1 billion number. So let's set this back to 0. And so that's one way where we can manipulate pieces of our game and just see what's going to happen. So anytime you're running, you can go over here and just start changing stuff, and it can be for anything you want. You can find it in your hierarchy and just go start changing properties, and that's perfectly okay. But yeah. So part of our score here has a score script associated with it, and if you double click on it and then double click on it here, it's going to open it up in the editor. And this is one of our scripts. So the cool thing about Unity, this is the first time you're using it, is it's very modular. So you, instead of having one big program, you have a bunch of small scripts that have a really focused task, and they're attached to these different objects. So the score script is really focused on what to do with the score, and that's all it does. And it's all basically displaying the score. So this is a small chunk of code to handle that, and there's a couple pieces in here. We'll get into this later, but awake is going to happen as soon as the script loads. So it's got to find the player object, and then update. This gets called every frame update. So by default, I think it's 60 frames a second. So 60 times a second, this update loop is going to get called, and update our score if we need to. And you can put this update loop in any of your game objects if there's certain things that you need to have happening every frame update. But just remember that these things are getting called 60 times a second. So if you have a bunch of these update loops and you're spending a ton of time in there, your game is going to slow down. So try to keep this clean, keep a little bit of code in there as possible. Get in and get out, and that's going to work good. But yeah, over here on the left, we see all of the other scripts that are within this project. So we have one for the bomb. Here's what a bomb does. What else do we have? Spawner. This is spawning enemies, and so it's doing this sort of stuff. Invoke repeating. Spawn. So it's going to say it's going to create this function and have it repeat every delay initially, and then spawn time after that. So it's going to wait 3 seconds, and then after that, every 5 seconds, it's going to come in here and instantiate an enemy. So, and we'll get into all this sort of stuff. I just wanted to show you, how it works right now. But just start poking around and see what you can do. So, this was the kind of the basic intro to Unity 5.1 for our games class. I wanted you to be familiar with this GUI, familiar with grabbing this project from the asset store. And the rest of it, was just a basic intro showing you all sorts of stuff. I don't expect you to understand what all of that stuff did that we just ran through, but I do expect you to want to be able to play with that stuff and go through, click in some of these code samples, and, these scripts that are attached to objects. May change some things, make people jump faster or higher, maybe arrange some of these things in the scene a little bit differently, and modify your score, that sort of stuff, to just get more familiar with this whole Unity environment and how we build games and things like that. So yeah, so that's it for this first demo, and we'll continue on from here.